Final seconds of the game, a chance to score, and the chance has gone begging. If your business's commerce platform keeps missing the target on golden opportunities, get the MVP you deserve. Get Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform revolutionizing millions of businesses worldwide. Whether you're a garage entrepreneur or IPO ready, Shopify is the only tool that you need to start, run, and grow your business without the struggle. Shopify puts you in control of every sales channel. So whether you're selling signed football boots from Shopify's in-person POS system or you're vending vintage shirts on Shopify's all-in-one e-commerce platform, you are covered. And once you've reached your audience, Shopify has the internet's best converting checkout to help you turn them from browsers to buyers. What I love about Shopify is how, no matter how big you want to grow, Shopify gives you everything you need to take control and take your business to the next level. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US. And Shopify is truly a global force, powering Allbirds, Rothy's, and Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across over 170 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. This is Possibility, powered by Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to take your business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/ranks.
Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Ray, and you're listening to the Ranks FC podcast.
Hello, Rank Squad, and welcome to Ranks FC. It's your favourite football podcast, back for another week. My name is Jack Collins, and I'll be your host today. And joining me all the way across the waves, Mr. Dean Jones. How you doing, mate?
I'm very good, mate. Yeah, it's a good life in San Diego. Not a spot of rain since I arrived in this country 10 days ago. I don't know what the weather's like there, mate. But
it has been pelting it down for the last 4 days in London. So there's that. And you're getting a heat wave, and we're getting flooding warnings.
Honestly, what is going on back there, man? I mean,
Who
weather
knows?
isn't the only reason I left England, but when all my friends and family are talking in the group chats about the weather and the downpours and the grey, I'm like, wow, it certainly helps when you're looking out the window and it's just blue skies and and warm all the time. So it's been nice, mate. Yeah, we've started to settle out here now. We've got a car. We're in the midst of sorting out a house we're going to move into soon. Yeah, the boys are. Dylan's loving life. I think he might become a surfer rather than a footballer at this rate.
Nice.
But whatever. Yeah, they seem happy. I'm reasonably happy, mate.
Good.
Getting to pod with you still. We're good.
Exactly. Nothing changes. It's just the time zones. That's all.
I mean, my happiness will probably depend on how England have done this week. So, some people will be listening to this beyond Wednesday night and we'll know how I'll be feeling one way or the other. But me and Dylan have got a venue all lined up, mate, for the game. We're off to Shakespeare's pub. We've been warned you have to get there early to ensure you get in. Doors open at 8 a.m. Kickoff is midday. So I reckon I'll be there at 8:30.
I was going to say 7:45, knocking on the door, trying to get them open in time.
Yeah,
I mean, you mentioned the time there, and the timing of this podcast is a bit of a weird one because by the time it's released, we'll be bang in the middle of the semi-finals of both the Euros and the Copas. So we've decided we're going to change things up a little bit today. We have done all of our reviews on the quarterfinals and talked about all of them across the Copa and the Euros on our Patreon Monday post box, which went out late last night as we're recording this. So if you want to go and listen to our bits and bobs on that, then the Patreon link is, as ever, in the description. But we're going to be talking today about some transfers, combining worlds a little bit, D, and we're going to do some Euro 2024 related transfers as the main ranking.
Yeah, and it'll be a little mix of, well, they're all players that are set to make transfers as soon as the tournament's over. A couple of the players aren't even in the tournament anymore, but they've certainly seen their stock rise over the course of the tournament. And certainly there are some big deals that are going to happen on the back of the Euros. And we'll just, I'm going to discuss some landing spots and some interesting, ways for these players to kind of move on to the next stage in their career. I'll get a couple of them I'm interested from you as well as to how you think they fit into their potential new clubs. So we'll get stuck into that on the main segment.
Absolutely. But before we do, it's time for a return to things we love. We haven't done things we love in a little while. I thought it was an appropriate time to bring it back. What have you got for me?
Well, I thought I'd keep it a little US themed right now. And obviously they were knocked out of Copa America last week. Shambolic style, really. And everybody over here wants them to get a new coach. They want this to be the end of the Berhalter era. Wanted it for a while, of course. I mean, I've had to laugh a little bit this week because all the talk and all the reports and columns have been about Jurgen Klopp becoming the next USMNT manager. Now, it's really started because Tim Howard has a column in the Daily Mail. And in that column, he said he'd personally fly to Spain in order to convince Klopp to become the new USA manager. And he did a whole piece around how he'd love Klopp to be the man. And on the back of his idea, which seems slightly fanciful, people are just jumping on it and saying, not reporting it as fact, but not far from it. And I'm just kind of, I'm intrigued by it. But I'm also kind of like, calm down, lads.
Quietly amused.
Because I'm like, you've got a dream. And it's nice to have aspirations as to who your coach can be. And to be fair, Jurgen Klopp is the type of guy that might fancy living near me in San Diego, surfing in the day, watching a few games, taking charge of a team that's very good. I can see him fancying that lifestyle for sure. Oh, I don't know that this is going to be the next coach, though.
No. It feels early. Weirdly, if it had been next summer, then maybe I think there might have been a pump. But he has made that very clear that he wants to spend some time out of football to recharge the batteries, etc. Now, I know international management is not exactly the same as club management, and it's not as intense day to day throughout the course of the season. But I still think it would be a pretty wild jump to go from I need to take a year out to becoming the manager of the next host nation or one of the three host nations for the 2026 World Cup.
Yeah, and obviously like Klopp would command a huge fee as well to be the boss. And I'm not saying it's beyond the US to go and spend extravagant funds to make that happen. But like you are talking like serious money here to be able to lure Klopp to take charge of the US national team. And I've seen people talking about the fact that, look, it happens in college sports. You get them paying a base fee for a coach, and a salary is also made up by sponsors. And I'm sure that there is a world whereby somebody else would be willing to fund Klopp as the US manager. But yeah, I'd say it's a little fanciful right now. ESPN actually did a long list of candidates that could be in the mix. His old assistant, actually, David Wagner, was one of the people they talked about. The old name, Steve Cherundolo, is on there. Wilfred Nancy is on there. There's all sorts of names. I think they got 15, 16 names on the list that they went through. Patrick Vieira was one of them as well. Thomas Tuchel and Thomas Frank made their way onto the list, as well as Mauricio Pochettino. So they're dreaming big out here, mate. And I guess you've got to, because you want somebody with some clout to get their hands on this group of players. Like, there is obvious upset and some dismay, really, that the US crashed out in the group stages, especially when you see Jesse Marsch has led Canada to the semi-final. However that semi-final has gone against Argentina, they got there. Canada got to a semi-final of a Copa America.
Yeah, even if they have scored 2 goals up to this point.
Yeah, however they've done it. I mean, they've done it. You know, they've left the US in the shade for now.
100%. They've left the rest of CONCACAF in the shade, to be perfectly honest with you. So, yeah, 100%. I mean, look, 2 years to go to a home World Cup. Go big or go home, it feels like. So I'm very excited. Very excited to see what happens next, at the very, very least. I'm going to take us on to something maybe not I love, but I thought it was worth mentioning, in that Thiago Alcantara retired from football yesterday. And I just wanted to take a moment to reflect on an incredible, incredible player who maybe his career didn't quite reach the peaks that we might have hoped, considering how good he was and considering those injuries that have set him back a little bit across the course of his career. But it was one of those, you look back at it, and I can't remember many players who I enjoyed watching more than Thiago. And I remember there was a period, obviously, at Bayern Munich when he was playing in the Bundesliga, and we've spoken at length about the Bundesliga and the kind of helter-skelter style that I think even more so when he was in the Bundesliga was a really prominent part of it. And at times it just sort of looked like there was a ballet dancer conducting things in the middle of a rock and roll concert in the midfield at Bayern Munich. And just what a special footballer, such poise, such grace, that ability to dictate the game from deep areas, but also, when Carlo Ancelotti used him in a more attacking role for Bayern Munich, the way that Jurgen Klopp spoke about Thiago when he joined Liverpool and saying that if you like football, you should enjoy watching Thiago. I'm not going to put out a limb here and say that he was one of the greats, because I don't think that his career probably took off enough to be considered in the midfield pantheons that we discussed when we're talking about a Toni Kroos or a Luka Modric or an Iniesta or a Xavi. But in terms of players that I loved watching, Thiago was right up there at the very, very top for me. And his retirement yesterday just gave me a moment of pause, I suppose, and reflection on a very, very special player. The way that he moved in the midfield. The first time you'd see him playing in these midfields that were a lot of physicality and a lot of bombing around. And then suddenly there was this man pulling strings, conducting from the middle of the park. I just loved watching him from the moment he broke through, from watching him in that Spanish under-21 side where he scored a hat-trick in the final as they won the Euros that year. He was just such a special footballer in so many different ways and so many different roles. I just wanted a moment of pause and appreciation for the maestro that was Thiago Alcantara.
It's hard because of the way things ended. You do forget just how good players were, because I guess we'd already kind of written him off over the course of the last year as to certainly seeing him again at the very top level in England. But you always feel that maybe they'll go on and play a little while somewhere else and it'll just be a slow burnout. Thiago always felt like a bit of a luxury signing to me when he came in to Liverpool. If you think back to the time, like, it was not really needed, was it? But I think Klopp at that moment had a big say in what was going on and wanted to make sure that he could take that team on and add a bit of luxury to it. And, he didn't do badly at Liverpool, but obviously got very unfortunate in terms of having that injury for the past year. But that, don't let it taint what he truly was. I think that you're well done there to try and reminisce a little and watch a little YouTube to see what he was truly capable of in his pomp.
There were glimpses of it. There was that game where Liverpool, I think it was 4-0 against Manchester United, where he completely and utterly ran the game from central midfield. It was like a really, really special performance. The kind of thing that people will talk about for years on Merseyside and beyond, right? But because there was that kind of sense that when he came into games and he was on form, no one could get near him. And that was why I think he was so special. You're right. I think he only played 5 games for Liverpool across the course of this last season. And at times, I think it felt like he was sort of the myth in the background. Oh, it'll be all right when Thiago comes back. And yet he never really got back to it. But there were those moments in between the injury issues, those flashes of brilliance, just a reminder of what an incredible player he was. So I just wanted to take a moment to give him some love and to say it's good luck in whatever comes next. There's talk that he might be going back as part of Hansi Flick's staff now at Barcelona. I don't know whether that's going to come to fruition or not, but a very, very special footballer and someone who I have absolutely adored watching play over the last few years. Shout out Thiago. What a career. 27 trophies, 11 league titles in that. It's been some going. He won 8 in a row, I think, at one point from his last season at Barcelona through his time at Bayern Munich. So not bad going in terms of the trophy count when you look at that. 2 Champions Leagues, although he was an unused substitute in one of those finals. A maestro of the highest order, and I will miss him, I think. Right, nostalgia over, I think. It's probably time for us to get into our main ranking, which will be starting after the break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Ranks FC, and in honor of Dean now being in the US, we've decided to get him a fancy new sound.
You're listening to the Dean Jones Transfer Show on Ranks FC. You can trust the guru's wisdom all summer long.
I love it. I absolutely love it. If you're on Patreon, you've heard that before because we do transfer shows over there, which are about to become more regular once I have a schedule to stick to, which I think will start from this week. I think things are about to become more normal for me after the past 10 days or so moving over here. But yeah,
we've done 5 or 6 of them over there already.
Yeah, we've done a few. Also consider that things are about to get busier, right? Like both tournaments coming to an end this week. We will be in full-blown transfer mode from next week. So, yeah, I'll be doing a lot more transfer stuff, a lot more to get stuck into. I love the jingle. I love the jingle.
It's great. It is very daytime radio, isn't it? I enjoy it.
It's so good. It's so good. So I've got 5 players here that I want to talk about on how they've fared at the Euros and how the world is now opening up for them in terms of making a transfer. I'll throw a few other names into the mix as we go along because some of them are kind of a side effect of these main moves. But yeah, there's some big names here. And the first one to talk about, actually knocked down on Patreon the other day, was Riccardo Calafiori of Bologna and Italy, who is being spoken of joining Arsenal reasonably imminently, as it's being reported today. Now, I said on Patreon the other day, I think it was about a week ago, that I was skeptical, but it was because all of the information was from Italy. There was not a single report from England until about 2 days ago that actually backed up that Arsenal were in for Calafiori. And it was interesting because it started, I guess, a couple of weeks ago. It might have been Di Marzio who was first to go with it. And Arsenal weren't knocking it down, but they also weren't confirming it. And what I've noticed with Arsenal at the moment is that, firstly, information is slightly harder to get this summer than it has been in past years. And I think they're trying to keep the doors locked on big information. And I also have noticed that they seem quite happy to let rumours ride. And sometimes, even if you think of Sesko and how that rumour went for a while, Arsenal just let it play out. And I was quite interested in that fact. And somebody said to me at the time, they'll be happy to do that because they've got stuff going on in the background at all times, which they'll be trying to keep quiet. So I did wonder if that was the case with Calafiori. Look, obviously, he had a good season at Bologna. So it wasn't like he's just a player.
Very good season with Sam Berkham at the centre-back.
Yeah, it's certainly a player that was already on the radar. And for me, the first time I'd really heard of him was across the course of the season. But obviously, that form came under Thiago Motta, who has now joined Juventus. Juventus thought they were signing Calafiori this summer. And that's another reason why I was very sceptical about the Arsenal thing, because I had heard a month ago, probably, that Juve were just going to get that deal done. And yesterday I checked back in with one of my sources in Italy who's very well versed on all things Juventus. And I was like, what has actually gone on here? Because I remember us talking and you were like, oh, Calafiori will join, like that's all set up. And he was like, yeah, it's a big surprise. It's caused, he didn't use the word unrest, but that's probably the best way that I could describe what he was describing. And I think it was basically that there was a deal in place with the player for a 5-year contract at Juventus, and that the deal would be around £20 million with player swaps involved going the other way. Motta and Calafiori would be reunited in Turin. And everything supposedly was looking pretty good. And then suddenly, Bologna, I think, thought, let's just try pushing into the Premier League and see what happens. And suddenly it all starts to explode a little Arsenal buy it. And now we're looking at a transfer which could be around £42 million for Calafiori to go and join Arsenal. Now, another reason I wasn't sure about this because I don't know where he fits in. Where's he going to play?
Yeah. I think this was my main concern as well. Now, there are a couple of caveats to this in the obviously Calafiori can play in a number of positions. He came through at Roma as a left back, was shipped off to Basel, then sort of came back to Bologna and has done really, really well in a centre-back pairing with Sam Berkema, as we mentioned. It's one of those things where in the Euros, he's played on the left side of a back three, which is probably a little bit closer to where your conventional left back in a back four would play, considering how Italy have sort of tilted, if you will, because Di Lorenzo is more of a natural defensive presence than DiMarco on the other side. So he's actually spent a lot of time in the areas where you expect him to be at left back. The other thing is that this Pep Guardiola trend of playing 4 centre-backs across the back four, and therefore bringing in Gvardiol to play at left back or Nathan Ake to play at left back, has kind of changed the way that I think Arteta is potentially looking at his fullbacks. Obviously, they made that move for Zinchenko to kind of mirror the stepping into midfield and opening up that extra player that Pep used to use. And now there is a latest innovation that Pep has started to use, which you think Arteta is probably looking at and thinking, can we do that but better? And I'm not making out here that Arteta is copying Pep Guardiola, because I don't think that's kind of how this works. But I think that there is a sense that the way that he's used someone like Jakob Kivior at left back at times this season suggests that that's the move that Arsenal are going for in terms of trying to close out those spaces. Now, Calafiori is a wonderful passer, wonderful line breaker with the ball at his feet. He's quick across the ground. He's very kind of lanky and he has long legs, which means that he can win the ball in pretty weird positions at times. He's not perfect as a defender, I don't think. But I think what's going to be interesting is seeing that transition back from nominally playing centre-back to nominally playing left-back, even if the differences are negligible in real terms for Arsenal. I like it. I like it a lot more than I did when I first heard about it. I think it's probably the way I would put it. At first, I was a bit confused. I was like, he's just transformed into this wonderful all-action, carry the ball out of the back centre-back, and I can't see Arsenal breaking up the Saliba-Gabriel partnership in the middle. So are they planning on shifting him back out to left back? But watching his performances across the course of this tournament and the positions he's taken up, some of the one-on-one defending that he's put together as well, I've started to become quite a lot more comfortable with it. And I like the fact that he's comfortable, one, on the ball and carrying it out into the midfield, but two, also defending in big spaces in transition. And I think we saw a fair bit of that against Spain, where he was having to sort of deal with 2 attacking threats at once and trying to kind of read the game rather than rushing in. And I thought he did that really, really well. He's very calm. He's a cool head. And I think that if Arsenal are going for this kind of 4 across the back that are all centre-backs in inverted commas with Ben White at right back, then Calafiori is actually quite a nice fit for that left-hand side if that's what they're trying to go with. So I'm hotter than I was, is probably how I put it. And I think that there is a space for him to fill there that he could probably do comfortably.
Yeah, and I guess if Arsenal were serious about maintaining a challenge to Man City, then they've got to make sure that they are backed up big style. And so even, Timber obviously is going to come back this season as well for Arsenal. And they need that depth across the back line. So it'll be interesting. But a great signing if they can work out how to make it work.
Yeah,
but,
lovely footballer.
A very good footballer and a very good addition. And if he's happy, then Arteta will be very happy to make that one happen. At number 4, I've gone for Ivan Toney, who definitely has issues in the transfer market this summer. And I'd say that the variety of options has altered. But over the past few days, I reckon he's come back onto the radar a little more than he would have been before. And if I'm Spurs or West Ham, I think I'd be really tempted to go here. Now, obviously, a big issue with Ivan Toney is that Brentford wants £60 million and it's a bit punchy. Anybody I've spoken to from any of the clubs, including Man United, Chelsea, Arsenal, when they were interested, they all talk about Ivan Toney as like a 40, 45 million pound player.
Yeah, fair.
And I think that probably is where it's at. Now, it's going to get interesting if somebody does lodge an offer that comes in that region, because Ivan Toney, I think his head's going to be turned, especially after a summer in which he's actually been involved in the England setup and now actually made his mark. His no-look penalty.
A cult hero. No,
he has.
Not just the no-look penalty. Obviously, no-look penalty was pretty incredible, but we've seen him do them before. But I think in terms of, I've been obviously keeping an eye on the social media coverage from across the different camps at the Euros. He's been one of the people that's really stepped up to do a lot of the media duties. Obviously, Josh Denzel hosts that sort of Lions Den, Unplugged, all of those kind of things. He seems to be someone that they keep going back to because there's some personality. And, they obviously released that video with him doing no-look other things the other day that was very funny. All of it just feels like he's become a little bit of a kind of cult superstar within the camp. And he seems to be very loved by the rest of the England camp, which is interesting.
Yeah, and that kind of flies in the face of everything that I'd heard previously as to why people didn't want to sign him. It was like his personality was actually the problem rather than a good thing. And it was one of the reasons I'd heard, for example, that Arsenal weren't going to sign him any longer. They didn't get good readings on the type of personality he would be to fit into their changing room. And so
he's quite dominant at the moment, right? Because as in, with all due respect to Brentford, it's big fish in a small pond. And I think that he's been pretty clear about the fact that he sees himself at a higher level than that, playing Champions League football or whatever that looks like. So therefore, his kind of, at the moment, he feels like the big guy in that dressing room. But I think he might have gone into the England camp and be like, oh, I'm a bit of a bit part player here. Maybe I have to kind of tone that down a little bit in order to make sure that I'm sort of warmly accepted into this group.
Yeah, and also if you're a club like Tottenham, for example, you're getting a taste here of how he would deal with pressure and expectations. And he's obviously taken it in his stride. I mean, to come on in the game the other day and to score that penalty in the shootout, which is basically the reason he was taken to the tournament. I mean, we all raised our eyes a little bit. It's like, is he really taking Toney to the Euros just to take a penalty in a shootout? And it's not just, because obviously he's played another game too, but he was still brought on in the last 30 seconds of that match and then had to play the extra time and stuff. But even in that extra time, I thought he did quite well. And look, his goals return wasn't really there last season. He started well after his ban, but then it faded.
To be fair, he did have a fair bit of time out. It's in rightly so, but he doesn't come naturally, I think immediately back to you, does it?
His reputation was highest when he was banned.
That might be true.
And now we're starting to get back to that. So I'm intrigued as to where Toney now ends up on the back of this Euros, because I do feel like he's suddenly a lot more enticing and tempting than he was 2 weeks ago even.
Also, bear in mind, Brentford have already got the backup plan in, right? In that Igor Thiago has signed, he's arrived. They unveiled that gigantic Brazilian flag down the side of the flats next to the stadium. I was talking to my aunt yesterday and she was saying that the people in the flats didn't get notified. So apparently it just went dark and they were like, what's going on? What's happened? And Brentford had just pushed down a massive flag down the side of the bit by the stadium, which was quite funny in many ways. Yeah. But I mean, look, and I've always said this, and with all, sense that Brentford fans will hate this. I know they will, because they'll be exactly the same if a Fulham player was linked. But I've always thought that Ivan Toney has the kind of character and personality and that kind of self-belief and arrogance in a positive way to be the number 9 for Chelsea. That's always been the thing I've said, because I think you need a certain type of character to pull that off. You look at the players who've gone and succeeded as Chelsea's kind of out-and-out striker, Diego Costa, Didier Drogba in recent years, and you're thinking, well, who's there? Who's got that belief, that kind of sense of unshakable, it's me vibes? The answer is Ivan Toney. He's the kind of player that could walk in there and be like, guys, I've got this, don't worry. And you can see that in everything that he speaks, all of the ways that he talks about himself, that kind of self-belief courses through him, and he's needed it to get through what has been, a kind of windy football career to this stage, to the point where he's now playing for England European Championship, scoring no-look penalties in quarterfinals. that is unshakable. And I think that's the kind of character that certain teams need. To be honest, I think Tottenham would be good for it as well. I think that was something that Tottenham could do with a little bit more of that kind of arrogance to push them through. But he's always been the kind of person I thought could bear the mantle of Chelsea's number 9 shirt or whoever plays up top in that role, because it's not an easy thing to do.
Bring him to Fulham.
The wind up of all wind ups.
We'll see. But yeah, Chelsea, Man United have had a look. Those are the top clubs he could end up at this stage. But we'll see. I mean, at the moment, West Ham exploring deals for Jean Duran, En-Nesyri, Jonathan David. So they're on that kind of vibe. And Tottenham kind of gone a little quiet. They're also waiting for Jonathan David. That'll be a big one. I mean, we're talking about Euros here, but Copa America, obviously, David, look, he may still be in the competition as you're listening to that, but I suggest he also might have been knocked out in the hours before you're listening.
The betting men would suggest he might have gone home by now.
He might well have gone home, but he also might have scored the winner against Argentina.
Stock up.
But either way, Jonathan David is going to become a big talking point at the end of this week, and he could easily end up at one of these clubs too. So let's keep an eye on that one. Let's roll on to number 3, where it's time to discuss Dani Olmo. Interesting. Obviously, his stock had a little rise this week because of his impact on the Spain team. He's having a pretty good Euros, isn't he? RB Leipzig player with a €60 million release clause. I've been reporting for a while that Man City are very interested in Dani Olmo. That kind of increased when their potential move for Paqueta from West Ham kind of hit the buffers because of his betting issues.
Hit the skids,
yeah. But yeah, Dani Olmo is quite an intriguing one. Barcelona are the other team kind of linked with Olmo at the moment. I'm not entirely convinced by that, but at the same time, who knows? Barcelona seem to pull money out of nowhere at times to make things happen. And
the kid's finally going home. Nice.
Yeah, this is it. And it's hard to rule out a transfer like that happening. But if he does leave Spain, then Man City are the team considered to be front runners. Like even as we move beyond the Euros, almost rumours are going to be there. I think that in the past week, there's been obviously a bit more focus on him because of the role that he's played in them progressing. But I think this is quite a nice signing. I tried to gauge the other day online, like what the reaction was around Man City signing. Didn't seem to be great, to be honest. A lot of Man City fans didn't seem to be that excited about what he would add to their team. So I'm interested, I said earlier on, there's one or two things that I'm interested to get your view on. And it is mainly this one, Dani Olmo's fit at Man City. It obviously isn't like significantly raising the bar, but this is a time when you've got to consider that, KDB, uncertain, Bernardo Silva, slightly uncertain as to how they move forward as Man City players. Paqueta, not likely to come in. Bruno Guimaraes has just been talked about as coming into the midfield. That hasn't materialised yet. Dani Olmo at like 51, 52 million pounds seems to me like a pretty good transfer. But yeah, I'm interested in your view on it.
Yeah, I really like Dani Olmo, and so does Luis de la Fuente. And actually, it's been a bit of an interesting one watching him try to grapple with the fact that he loves Olmo and trying to get him into the side when Pedri has obviously been playing so well. That's now been cleared up by this injury. And so there's absolutely no doubt in my head. I mean, this is going to look really stupid if he hasn't started the game against France, but there's almost no doubt in my head that he is the player that steps in now and sort of takes up that slightly more of an attacking mantle in this Spanish team as that sort of 8-10 player in the De La Fuente system. It changes the system slightly from a 4-3-3 more to look a little bit more like a 4-2-3-1, I think. But generally, I really like him. And I think that his development down the years has been really impressive. He obviously left Barcelona very young to sign for Dinamo Zagreb and very, very quickly kind of was like, oh, you've missed out on a player here, lads. And then he signed for Leipzig and he's continued to grow and improve. I think look at the start of last season. I think he started with a hat trick against Bayern Munich, which was pretty incredible. And then, they won the Super Cup and he was a massive part of that as well. He's had a really good stint and he's played maybe his best football in a Spain shirt. I think he's got 10, 11 international goals now. At this point, he's really started to step up when he's thrown that red shirt on. He does play, I think, best as a number 10. And the way that Leipzig play with two forwards and two wide men outside them, that kind of synthesis and the way that he's played alongside Šeško and Lois Openda at times, with Xavi Simons around in the mixer as well, it does feel like that's a system that really suits his ability. Now, what that would look like at Manchester City, I don't quite know, because we can plan all we like for what City might look like next year, and by December, Pep will almost certainly have changed it, and they'll be playing in a completely different way. So there might be a space that opens up a little bit more there. But I think you're right in terms of a player. I think he's better sort of drifting off the left onto his right foot rather than a Bernardo Silva on that right hand side on his left. But if there are players leaving and big players leaving, then you want players who have that international experience, that experience of playing in the Champions League, of experience of performing at the highest level to come in. My only real question is, would Olmo occupy the same kind of spaces on the pitch that Phil Foden does? Because that would be the first concern in terms of you just sort of looking at that area just outside the box, sort of on the left-hand side of the pitch. I think that's where Olmo does a lot of his best work. It's also where I think Foden does a lot of his best work. So just trying to make that tick and make that look. But we've just spoken about Arsenal, right? And looking for depth and quality off the bench in order to try and make things happen. I think Olmo is the kind of player who would add a lot of that to this City side. It would give them a different option when they're playing in those kind of spaces. And, an incredibly talented footballer, someone that you kind of want to get into your team. And I really, really do like him. I think he's a pretty special player. And it's going to be interesting to see how that one develops now. I suppose the kind of flip side of that is at Leipzig, they've just lost Xavi Simons. Obviously, he's left on loan. They're pushing quite hard to get him back on loan for another season. If they do manage to get him back on loan and they have Baumgartner, who's had an absolutely incredible tournament himself, and Simons in those roles, alongside a couple of other players who are picked up and have been doing some interesting things recently. They just signed Asan Udraogo from Schalke for 10 million, which everyone was a bit confused about, I think, at the time. But another player that could probably play in those kind of wide 10 roles in the Red Bull system. It's going to be interesting to see what that looks like and who fits where. But if they do get Simons back, it might open the door up for someone like Olmo or a Baumgartner, in fact, to leave, because maybe there's just a little bit of excess in those areas, and they'll look to cash in at the right moment in order to reinvest, because that's the way the model works, right?
Yeah, exactly that. And we always have to beware of how that could happen. I think that his injury record isn't ideal. No. And I that is one thing that makes me wonder whether it will happen. But they've been linked with the likes of Guimaraes, who had a 100 million clause. So you're looking at Olmo. I know he's not the same player, but at half the price of that, you can believe that they would see value in it. Yeah. And there was a stage, probably January, February, when they were wondering about the likes of Musiala or Florian Wirtz, and like those deals not really having the potential right now. Feels again like this has ease, like because he's got a clause there that can be triggered. You've seen that he can play at the top level in this international tournament. I'm not saying that would be a reason for, Pep's not going to be that reactive. And I think that Pep's interest and even the director's interest goes back probably a year now, to when they first started looking at Olmo and considering him as a transfer prospect for the season. I think there was even conversations about him early in the stages of last season to just gauge what the availability would be of him. He knows a couple of the players within the Man City setup. I think it's a nice fit, and I think if he's asked Rodri any questions, Rodri would have been like, "Come on, mate, come with me."
Yeah, well, we'll be able to see what the two of them look like in a little bit more depth this evening. So that'll continue to guide the process, I wonder. But yeah, I think it's a nice enough fit and would be a nice depth option for Man City, especially if, as you say, if a couple of the big guns might be on the move.
Absolutely. Right, let's move on to number 2. Man United might sign a good centre-back. Matthijs de Ligt is... The rumours gathering pace, and, even among... the rumours with Lenny Yoro and Jared Branthwaite and offers made for both of those players, the Lit is separate from this. And the feeling is that the player's interested and the deal is there to be done potentially. I think this is a fantastic transfer for Man United if they can get it over the line. Before I go any further, I really want to understand from you what you would make of de Ligt taking this move now and whether it is time to get out of Bayern.
Yeah, I quite like it. Again, another one where I'm sort of, Matthijs de Ligt, one of those really wonderful players who came through really young, made a move. And you remember that summer, Frankie de Jong went to Barcelona and there was talk that de Ligt had this choice between going to Barcelona or going to Juventus. And he decided he was going to go off to Juventus. And that move didn't necessarily work out. I also don't think it was dreadful. There's a lot of chat about where it was and how it kind of played out. I thought de Ligt was all right for Juventus. They weren't brilliant at that point, and I don't think that anyone's going to sit here and say that it was the most solid defensive partnership you'll ever see. But equally, he'd come in there, after a golden age of centre-backs and was trying to make sure, live up to that reputation, which is hard for a young player, whilst the side are also going through this kind of renovation and restart. So it was interesting to see how that move was perceived. I always thought that he did okay at Juve. He went to Bayern and it's been a sort of similar story in some ways. Most of the time where I've seen Matthijs de Ligt, he's looked absolutely fine. And actually, you watch him alongside Upamecano quite a lot. And I've always felt like de Ligt was the one that looked more assured, more comfortable in those settings. And yet, Bayern seem to be on a constant march for buying new centre-backs and making it work. And obviously we've seen them buy Kim Min-jae over the last few years. And then now it looks like Jonathan Tah is joining as well this summer from Bayer Leverkusen. Suddenly it's like, well, where does that leave de Ligt? And I think truthfully, obviously we don't know what Vincent Kompany's plans are, but if we were taking last year's pecking order, you'd probably suggest that de Ligt would be 4th in that pecking order, which seems ridiculous considering, 1, how good a player he is, and 2, the fact that I don't think he's been particularly bad for this side. So if the opportunity to sign him comes up and to reunite him with Erik ten Hag, obviously, and I have reservations about some of the players that United have picked up to be like, oh, we should obviously reunite him with ten Hag. That'll get the best out of him. And obviously the notable one there is Antony. But generally, I think that we saw a lot of growth from Matthijs de Ligt under ten Hag in those seasons at Ajax. And we've come to a point now where I think a reuniting with that manager and someone putting complete faith in him once again could be exactly what his career needs. I really like it. I think he's a phenomenal footballer, and I think he's been given a bit of a rough ride by quite a lot of the coaches he's worked under in the last couple of years. So I'm pretty hot. Yeah, I like it. I think it's a good move. And generally, when you kind of take all of those things into account, I've also just completely forgotten that Bayern also signed Hiroki Ito of Stuttgart. So they have another player. Yes, he can play left back as well, but another player that can play centre back in that era. So you'd maybe say de Ligt is now 5th in that picking order, as long as Jonathan Tah does come in, which looks incredibly likely. He needs to go out and rediscover that form, refind it. And I think, you're looking at a player who's still only 24, he'll be 25 in August, who has the peak and the best years of his career still ahead of him. I think it's been a remarkable signing for United.
What I find quite interesting is like the briefings I've had over the past few months, even amid the uncertainty of Ten Hag, was like, it won't affect the transfer plans because players that are coming into the club are not dependent on manager. They're kind of manager proof. It doesn't matter. Yeah, here we are. Ten Hag's just penned that contract. They're going after de Ligt, and they're also going after another Dutchman, Xerxes, who is set to complete his move from Bologna, possibly by the end of this week, which is interesting. Like, Ten Hag's deal's done, and suddenly United are signing 2 Dutch players. Coincidence? Maybe, but got to be a little bit more to it than that, right? I mean, you're also seeing the Dutch contingent behind the scenes, Van Nistelrooy, all these sorts of things come into place.
Yeah.
It's a little bit Holland FC, but not necessarily a bad thing. Like you've got to go for a vision at this stage, right?
Dutch players have usually done quite well at United, is probably something worth pointing out. To be honest, I would be suggesting that United signed De Ligt no matter who was in charge. So I think that one's a little bit different. And I love Zirkzee. You've heard me speak about him on the podcast for, the last year or so. Very different type of striker to Erasmus Højlund. And I wonder if that versatility and the fact that he could probably play in a 2, that he might drop back and play as a 10 at times.
Is he better than Højlund?
Is he better than Højlund? They're so different.
Yeah.
They're so different.
For United's... For the version we saw of Man United last season, where was Zirkzee fit into that Højlund role?
Well, I think that's what it is. He's the kind of striker that comes deep and facilitates. He's a very different kind of. He's not an off the shoulder runner in the model that Højlund is. He's someone that likes to drop in, link play. He's more of a facilitator in terms of what he creates for others. His goal scoring record isn't phenomenal, Zirkzee, but in terms of what he's brought to that Bologna team and the way that he sort of brought them up the pitch and got other players into play and allowed others to play within their best selves, I think he's a lovely footballer. And I wonder what this looks like. And I do wonder if there's a world where you see Zirkzee playing as a 10 with Højlund in front of him in order to try and facilitate that link up.
Well, I also think that one of the things that Rashford's got a concern about is like his role changed once Højlund was made the focal point of that United attack, because the spaces that he wanted to get into, Højlund was basically being told to run into. So Rashford's role, I'm told he felt, was more restricted last season. And if Zirkzee's going to come out of those positions, maybe it's Rashford running into those positions, and that's one of the ways they can make him happy again. Because that's one of the things that has to happen at United. So again, I
quite like that.
A very different option, but De Ligt, Zirkzee, on the back of a very good tournament for the Netherlands. It's certainly something that seems to be coming together right now. Just a quick one for you.
Neither of them have played much. It's probably worth pointing out in this Dutch squad. But I think that being in and around a camp that's been more successful than I think many had envisioned. Obviously, we don't know if they're in the final or not, but they could well be at this point. And if they get there, just being part of a squad like that, I think raises the kind of expectation of where you are and what you can achieve and what it must be like in training. Because again, like Spain, like England, I think as well, it feels like quite a happy camp. Even if everyone else, is a little bit questioning of where they are and what they're doing, the actual inside of the camp feels pretty solid right now. And that's a nice place to be for a lot of players.
Yeah, I was just going to say to you to end a little mini ranking. De Ligt, Jared Branthwaite, Lenny Yoro, the 3 players United looking at primarily for these centre-back positions. It could be that 2 of them come in, but if you had to pick one, how would you rank those 3 players in terms of what the order should be?
Look, I think Yoro is a phenomenal young player. I also think he's 100% going to be at Real Madrid. So it's kind of one of those where, he's made it quite clear where he wants to be. And so therefore going into sort of a second choice option, if you will, and look, having Manchester United as your backup option is some place to be, right? But generally, I think that you kind of want players who are really dialing in and committed to it. And what I've heard about this De Ligt deal and been reading about is that he's basically instructed Rafaela Pimienta, his agent, that he basically only wants to sign for Manchester United. That's where he wants to be under a manager he knows. That's the kind of player I think you want coming in. A player who has kind of turning down other potential suitors to be like, I want to be part of this project. I want to dial into it. I think that's about as good as a deal on the money that we're talking about you could ask for. De Ligt sort of been, talked about around £35 million. That is a steal as far as I'm concerned. And I think when you're considering the prices of, Branthwaite potentially having a £45 million bid knocked back today from Manchester United via Everton, they're talking about wanting him in the £70 million bracket. Fair enough. Everton need to get as much as they can for their player. Absolutely fine. But if you're talking about De Ligt at £35 million there, I think he's the best option by a mile.
Yeah, and I mean, even if it's not that, I think it tops out at under 45 million, which again is less than Jarrad Branthwaite. So, yeah, I think De Ligt actually is the best defender United could go and sign. And number one of the star players, in my eyes, of the Euros is Nico Williams of Athletic Club and Spain. I always had doubts about whether this player could truly take the step up to become an elite player.
I didn't.
I just didn't. 2 years ago, I was like, has he got the decision-making qualities in the final third? That is what is going to dictate whether he becomes a top baller. He's done it. And look, Arsenal, Spurs, Chelsea, Man United were all linked with him in the Premier League. But right now, there's only one club, Liverpool, one club being linked with him, and that is Barcelona, who say they can afford him. He's got a $63 million release clause, £49 million, 50 odd million euros. Whatever it is, whatever currency that is, it's a good deal, right? Now, Nico Williams does command big wages. Athletic Club, by nature, pay very good salaries, right?
Well, they can't sign new players, really, so they have to pay well.
Exactly. So that's one of the perks. But to sign him in the Premier League, you were looking at basically upwards of £300,000 a week, which is a lot.
Just a bit.
Barcelona are going to have to come up with some funds. Now, they are in excess of their annual La Liga spending limit. They are unable to register new signings. Yet here we are, Juan Laporta, confidently, let me say that again. Juan Laporta confidently claiming that will all be fixed and they'll be able to sign players like this very soon. He says he's working with Hansi Flick on possible signings and that Deco's got the job of closing operations on these big deals. And he means he's going to go out there and sign Nico Williams. That's the plan. That's how I'm viewing this right now. Nico Williams as a Barcelona player would be pretty tasty, not going to lie. Quite what that means for all of the players currently taking up those forward positions remains to be seen, but at least one of them is going to have to be ditched. I do like it. And at a time, obviously, when Real Madrid are going big guns at the moment and they're doing their huge unveiling of Kylian Mbappe and all the rest of it, to go out there and just sign Nico Williams on the side would be a pretty nice move. I think I'm here for it. I think they're ready for it. And on the back of a tournament like this, I think he deserves it.
Yeah, I love it, and I think I deserve it. No, 100%. It's been special watching him and Lamine Yamal take defenses apart, right? And if you can get one of them, the other one tends to tear you. So Barcelona will be looking at that and going, well, can we recreate that? And I do think it's interesting that Hansi Flick in particular, obviously someone who worked really well with the Bayern wing core that were there at the time. Obviously, Robert Lewandowski through the middle as well. This starts to reek a little bit of what Flick did at Bayern Munich, and what Flick did at Bayern Munich was pretty spectacular. So generally, the way he wants to play, the way that I think he will change the system from what Xavi was doing, means that they do need another threat down that left-hand side if they're going to try and, recreate that in the aggregate, if you will, what they did at Bayern Munich into this Barcelona side. And you're right, what it means for Rafinha, what it means for Ferran, I don't quite know. But I do feel like Barcelona are quite weak on that left-hand side. And actually, they have a lot of right-sided players you expect to be in that kind of space who are all doing similar things, but they all kind of prefer to be on the right. And to bring in someone who will just nail down that left wing spot from the moment he walks through the door in Nico Williams, it would be pretty special, I think. So, look, I don't know if Barcelona can afford it. No one knows if Barcelona can afford it, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't think Barcelona know if Barcelona can afford it. But if they have found a way and they're finding the levers and finding, certain players to leave or whatever it looks like, they can get this done. I think it elevates Barcelona quite quickly to a new level next season.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be an exciting one on the back of these Euros. And I think we're in for a good transfer window, I've got to say. It's been steadily picking up pace. There's plenty of rumours out there, but this is a pivotal week, obviously, with these two international tournaments coming towards the end, and that's when it's go time for all these big deals.
Absolutely. 100%. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Dean Jones. That was a transfer ranking from Euro 2024. We got some guru wisdom after the break. Stick with us. Welcome back to Ranks FC. Time for part 3 and some
Guru wisdom, guru wisdom, guru wisdom.
Well, wisdom's on the agenda.
Oh, I still need wisdom, and adjusting to life out here. I said a few weeks ago, there's a few things I was scared of, like the national anthem and tipping. Tipping. The national anthem hasn't been a problem yet, but the tipping is causing me a bit of angst. What's really annoying, right, is whenever you go into a shop to pay, they have like the screen in front where you like tap your card or insert your card, but the screen comes up and it says the price, but the first thing that's there is like, how much are you tipping? It's like 25%, 20, 18, other or no tip. And like the person is directly staring at you and can see the screen. And I can't deal with this yet. So I'm like,
pressure.
Yeah, it's pressure. And I just feel rude. But like, all I've done is ordered a coffee from you. Like, why do I need to give you any money? But I am feeling the pressure to do it. And at the moment, I keep, even if it's just like a couple of dollars, I'm like,
have you tipped a machine yet?
Haven't tipped a machine, and I'm not going to do it. It's the human pressure. It's the like, I feel rude. I mean, the worst. Noel's one guy did well. We ordered Domino's. It was 4th of July or the day after 4th of July.
You ordering a Domino's?
Like the kids were hungry. I was hungry. We had all our friends over here, and I was like, look, they're hungry. Let's just get them some pizza. So our friend had ordered it on the app because my Domino's app from the UK, it's not the same app, so it didn't work. So they had to order it. But then they all went back out to watch some fireworks. And I was like, I'll stay here. If it says he's close, I'll just wait here. So they all left, and suddenly I was like, gotta tip him, haven't I? Like,
got no cash.
I didn't know how much the order was. I thought, right, it was 3 pizzas, Domino's prices. Like, what am I giving? And also, I have no cash anyway. So I run upstairs to Dylan's bedroom, try to find his money because he's the only one who's got any money in this house. His cash he's saved for a Target trip. Anyway, so I thought $10 is, that's more than enough. But it's 4th of July. Like I don't mind being a bit more friendly today.
Yeah.
So anyway, gives me the pizzas, give him $10. Seemed happy. I was like, oh, that went well. Good luck to you. Get home, and our friend goes, oh, you didn't tip him, did you? I did it on the app. Oh my God. Geezer's made about $25 by delivering 3 pizzas.
Fair enough. It's 4th of July.
It was a 4th of July. I let him off, but the coffee shop one is hard. Even you go to 7-Eleven, it's like, do you want a tip? No, I don't want a tip in 7-Eleven, mate. Like, so I haven't caved into that one.
Pay your staff properly, man.
Well, it's interesting because one of our listeners, Chris, on the back of me moaning about this last time, he did send me a bit of advice. And he said, actually, us Americans also think the tipping culture has gone too far. The only places you'll be typically judged for not tipping are restaurants with a waiter. To this point, 20% is standard. A bar with a bartender and your barber. I haven't found a barber yet, by the way. He says tips are auto-applied if you have a party of 6+, so make sure you don't tip twice. So yeah, Americans do think it's gone too far. I am just struggling with the person staring at me while I make a decision on whether I give them
the person
money.
Who's losing out on this is the person who's actually done any of the work. And that's the hardest bit about it. And that's why it's really difficult, right? And the person who is, making the coffee or whatever that is, probably should be getting paid more. And so therefore the tip makes sense in that regard. And like, I'm all for that, but I'm just, my fundamental sign is just pay people the right amount of money for the jobs they do. And then it'd be fine, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I just need to get used to going custom tip, nothing. That's what I've got to get brave enough to start doing in those situations, because
you can just, if it all goes wrong, you can just say, sorry, I'm English.
Yeah, and I put on very English accents at the moment when I'm ordering things.
Yeah.
So that people realise that I'm not a local. I think they're fine with it. I think it's going okay.
So that I'm not held to local customs. Well, we'll see. We'll see if it
so it's
pans
not really a
out.
wisdom at the moment, mate. It's kind of like I'm still gaining wisdom of the local area, and still my biggest issue is the tipping. The driving is going to be pushed back for a while because the house that we are moving into is walking distance from school, walking distance from shops, walking distance from where we're going to play football, and anywhere else I need to go, Taylor can drive or I'll get a Lyft or an Uber. So that is all sorted. It's just this tipping. And next week I'll give you all an update on how brave I've been in terms of the 0%.
Yeah, if anyone has any tips for Dean, ironically, then please do send them in. He's just, I was going to say an Englishman in New York, but not quite. He's wrong side of the country, but we're close enough to quote Sting. And with that, I think it's probably time for us to call it a day. So all that's left for me to do is say thank you very much to Mr. Dean Jones.
Cheers, mate.
I've been Jack Collins. This has been Ranks FC. We hope you've enjoyed this slightly different, slightly tangential episode of Ranks FC. Felt like the only appropriate thing to do in the midst of these tournament semi-finals going on. But we hope you've had a good time. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you very shortly, gang. Take it easy. P. Final seconds of the game. A chance to score, and the chance has gone begging. If your business's commerce platform keeps missing the target on golden opportunities, get the MVP you deserve. Get Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform revolutionizing millions of businesses worldwide. Whether you're a garage entrepreneur or IPO ready, Shopify is the only tool that you need to start, run, and grow your business without the struggle. Shopify puts you in control of every sales channel. So whether you're selling signed football boots from Shopify's in-person POS system, or you're vending vintage shirts on Shopify's all-in-one e-commerce platform, you are covered. And once you've reached your audience, Shopify has the internet's best converting checkout to help you turn them from browsers to buyers. What I love about Shopify is how, no matter how big you want to grow, Shopify gives you everything you need to take control and take your business to the next level. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US. And Shopify is truly a global force, powering Allbirds, Rothy's, and Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across over 170 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. This is Possibility, powered by Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to take your business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/ranks.